Welcome to another edition of Overcome Out Loud. Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. This podcast has really been created and dedicated to sharing the stories of people that have overcome adversity and challenge in their lives to give other people hope. So many people have suffered in silence, with so many issues that by having such courageous men and women come on and share their stories, we're able to give other people hope. And I'm moved today and honored today to have with me an American hero. I met our guest today a few months ago when he was out speaking to a group of young students and learned so much in my impactful days with him. With us today is 20-year veteran of the New York Fire Department, retired fireman and survivor of the tragic events of 9/11, Tim Brown. Tim, welcome to Overcome Out Loud. I can't tell you how good it is to see you.
Good to see you too, brother Charlie. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's amazing. I learned, there's so much to cover with you, and I learned so much that I never realized when I had a chance to sit down with you and talk about, the lost members, men and women of the New York Fire Department, the victims that were in the towers, and also the members of all the first responders, and your perspective on that is amazing. And I want to give our listeners the opportunity to hear what I think is truly a story of courage, vulnerability, and overcome from you. And maybe just, there's a part of your story that I think is captivating to me, which is, how you decided to actually, take on this career. When did you know from a young age that you wanted to be a firefighter?
No, I would say a very specific moment occurred. I was not a very good kid in my early teens. And when I was 15 years old, a friend of mine named Jay Walsh told me that he was a junior fireman. This is in Connecticut, where we had, volunteer fire department. And
Yeah.
My eyes got big as saucers, and I said I could be a junior fireman, and he said, "Yeah, come down on Wednesday night, and we'll see how it goes, and you can start training with us and all that." And he said, "But you can't do these other bad things. You have to stop doing these other bad things if you want to be a junior fireman." And that straightened me out and gave me purpose and mission and direction and all that. And from that day on, I knew I wanted to be a fireman. And pretty shortly thereafter, I knew I wanted to be a New York City fireman. So I worked very hard toward that goal.
So in growing up in Connecticut, and I think it's amazing how you talk about having purpose and how your eyes lit up and really having a purpose can change the trajectory of our lives. And obviously I had no idea of what that experience would be like. The connection to become a New York City fireman. I mean, obviously there's lots of places to be a fireman and there's lots of places to be of service and save other people. What was the draw? I can only imagine, but I'd love to hear directly from you what that draw was, because you talk about that pretty passionately.
Yeah, I mean, New York is the place, right? Throughout the whole world, firefighters all over the world look to New York because New York is very busy and has a lot of experience and has been through, many situations that other fire departments are learning about. So New York City Fire Department is the leader. And especially back then, I mean, back then in the 80s, it was very, very busy. It was still, I guess the tail end of the war years where there were many, many, many fires. And in Connecticut, if we went to a certain spot up on a hill, you could listen to the fire department radio. And so we used to go, a few of us guys would go up there and sit in the car and listen to the New York Fire Department radio and listen to how busy the Bronx was or Brooklyn was or Harlem was. And when you're a firefighter, that's what you want to do. You want to be busy. You don't want to sit around the firehouse all day. You want to be out there helping people.
Yeah, that's amazing perspective. So I'll tell you, as a layperson who comes from a background which creates a lot of fear and anxiety with me over confrontation, it's exactly what I think about. And this is, I think, one of the things that I think is amazing about your personality, your drive, your commitment is, and I want to talk a little bit about adversity tolerance, because it's like being in the big leagues. It's like, I want to go where I can practice and be good at the thing that I've trained to do, which is to fight fires and to save people. And I think that's such an incredible mindset that we as a society are so lucky that so many men and women have, because it's unique, it's rare, and it speaks volumes about the kind of person that you are and that the people that you've served with are. And where did, if you could kind of help us understand, where is that something that you were born with? Is that something that you developed? Was it part of your training? I mean, it's like, I want to be in the action. I know you traveled out here with your friend Jay Redmond. Both of you share that commonality, Jason being obviously a retired Navy SEAL. Give us some perspective on that mindset, Tim.
Well,
Jesus.
I don't know any other way to approach it. I want to be the very best at whatever I do, and especially that. I mean, it's very exciting, right? Little boys and little
Yeah.
girls. You see the fire truck and the eyes light up, and you're like, wow, like mommy or daddy, what are they doing? And they say, well, they're going to help people, and there's something very powerful in that. Knowing that you have the training, the experience, and the intestinal fortitude to help people who are in need. And being a firefighter is kind of the epitome of that. Really, all you do is help people. In law enforcement, you have to, enforce the law, and sometimes you're hurting people by doing that. But as a firefighter, you're always going to help. And I think there's something beautiful about that. There's something very fulfilling about that. And if I'm going to go do that, I want to do it in the busiest, best place in the world. If you want to be in the military, you'd be a Navy SEAL, or you'd be a Delta Force guy. If you're in the intelligence community, you're doing the very best you can do there in the CIA or other, the very top of it. I know people in the intelligence community who, in the quietness, have hung on to seek justice for us who were involved in 9/11 every day for years and years and years. And they do it in the shadows, and they do it quiet, but they're at the top of the game. And even when they find who they're looking for, they don't talk about it for a long, long time afterwards, and maybe never. So I think no matter what it is that you find intriguing or that motivates you, try and be at the top of it. I don't understand a different way than doing it that way.
Well, it's an amazing perspective and an amazing mindset. And like I said, I think all I can say is that we as a society are lucky that there are people built like you. And I was reflecting as you were talking, imagining you guys in Connecticut looking out over New York City and listening to the radio. And, as a tourist who's traveled to New York City, I grew up in Southern Maine. I went to school in Connecticut, spent a lot of time in New York City. I don't think I've really ever taken stock of the sirens as anything but background noise until I met someone like you who knew that was a calling for them to get into action to help people. It serves as such a different dynamic. And I think when you talk about New York being not just the hotbed of activity, there's something special about being a New York City firefighter. And I know this is going to play into our story, but the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the camaraderie, the fellowship, the I've got your back, we're doing this together, whatever, that seems to just ooze out of being a New York City fireman. And that's as an external kind of outsider looking in. And can you maybe, because I know that's going to carry into, what we experienced, what you experienced, and your brothers and sisters experienced, but is that perception accurate?
It is 100% accurate. I mean, that occurs in other places too. My niece Taylor is a firefighter up in Providence, Providence, Rhode Island, and I know that they have similar camaraderie in the Providence Fire Department that we have here. So it's it's an incredible blessing that in my life I had two families. I
Uh,
had my mom and dad and siblings, and I had the New York City Fire Department. I still have, even though I'm retired, it's still a brotherhood for me. I was hanging out with the guys from the Emerald Society Bagpipe Band yesterday, uh, who I just ran into, and it was the same. It was beautiful. I was really happy to see some of my friends who I haven't seen in a long time, and I just feel like the luckiest guy in the world to have been able to be a part of that. And on the bumper stickers, one bumper sticker on the New York City fireman's car after 9/11 said "Never forget," and the other one said "On heaven and earth, still the greatest job in the world."
wow.
And so even after what happened to us, and I had to take a hard swallow there,
Yeah.
uh, it is still the greatest job in the world, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially like military coming back when they are lost a little bit and can't find their purpose or whatever. Go in the fire department, even if it's a volunteer fire department where you are. Get involved, because it's a similar camaraderie in the firehouse that there is in units in the military. And I just feel like I was given a gift in being a New York City fireman, even though I lost 100 of my friends on 9/11, and all the suffering that's been since then. It was still the greatest job in the world. And I would do it again. If I was a young man, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would do the same thing.
Uh, what a testimony to commitment. What a testimony to passion and purpose. And what's not lost on me is, as we sit here on August 5th, that we're less than a month away from the anniversary of the events of 9/11. And to hear, and I think when I hear the description, it's Tim Brown is a tireless reminder and advocate in so many ways for the losses and the consequences that were experienced. And I know it takes, I just know from looking in your eyes, having, doing as much as you're doing, that, it can't help but take a little piece of your soul, a little piece of your heart with you every time you have to share this. But you share it for your brothers, you share it for your sisters. You do this because you don't want to forget. And even though it is and remains, that incredible profession, that we experienced a tragedy. And you described it to me in a way, by the way, I've never heard it before. And we'll talk a little bit about your views on what happened. And it wasn't just a loss, and they weren't taken from us. You have a very direct and specific way of describing that loss. And so, obviously nothing could prepare you for this. You've fought a lot of fires, you've been to a lot of accident scenes. you know you wake up on September 11th, and it's another day. Where were you stationed, and kind of what did a normal day look like, and how did that turn around and change for you forever?
So most of my career was in the Bronx. I wound up in Rescue 3, which is the special operations unit for Bronx and Harlem and Washington Heights. And so for 7 years I was there, and we would respond to the more major disasters, emergencies, more specialized rescue, building collapses, things like that. Um, and we were very busy, and I spent 7 years there. I had become best friends with Captain Terry Hatton, who was on 9/11 the captain of Rescue 1, but he was highly respected by the leadership of the New York City Fire Department, and that's why he was chosen to be the captain of Rescue 1, the premier elite rescue company of the kind of the Manhattan Fire Department. And Terry was my boy until he met Beth, and then it was me and Terry and Beth hanging out all together, and then it was like the three of us, and Beth was Mayor Giuliani's assistant. So through that, we got to know the mayor very well, through Beth, and they kept asking me to kind of hang up my helmet and work for the mayor. And I was able to resist for a couple of years, but eventually I said, okay. And so I hung up the helmet and I put on a tie and I went to work in the mayor's office of emergency management for Mayor Giuliani. Uh, it was a hard decision for me, but he needed the help, and um, it was time to go. So that's where I was on the morning of September 11th, 2001. I had been promoted within that group. I was a supervisor of field operations. There were about 15 first responders in that group. And I would go in every morning early to work, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I'd go to the cafeteria at 7 World Trade Center, which was where our office was. And I would sit down, relax, eat my Cheerios, read the newspaper or all the newspapers, because we didn't have smartphones or anything like that back then.
Right.
I wanted to know every morning. I wanted to kind of take the temperature of the city. I wanted to know what was happening. I would read through for articles about things that might impact our day, and things that we should be keeping an eye on. And at 8:46, the power went out in our building. And this building, 7 World Trade Center, was a modern high-rise building. Very unusual for the power to go out. And within 5 seconds, we got power again. So I knew we were on our backup emergency generators, and I knew something had happened, but I didn't know what. In this 5 seconds, the people at the glass facing the North Tower all at once stood up and ran screaming toward the exit. So they were running by me. And I actually grabbed one young lady by the shoulders and kind of had to shake her back to reality. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "A plane just hit the tower." And that's how I first found out about it. And I mean, I knew it was bad, but it was something that had happened before in New York City. We had helicopters or planes run into high-rise buildings. Um, I think automatically everyone kind of thought something like it was a little Cessna. The pilot had a heart attack and, went astray and hit the tower. So that's what I thought. And I went up in the elevator in our building up to the 23rd floor where our emergency operations center was. And I wanted to ensure that we were doing a full activation. So I went to our watch command, which is our listening post, which listens to all the police and fire radios, and it's our communications hub. And it was buzzing. And the supervisor there, Mike Lee, I yelled to him, "You okay? Full activation?" And he gave me the thumbs up. They had to make 150 phone calls as quickly as possible. Then I ran over to our emergency operations center, which was like a big kind of Star Wars with screens and computers and everything, state of the art, modern. The supervisor, Mike Berkowitz, there was already on deck. He was already powering up the whole room, all the computers, 150 workstations, getting all the TV screens and plasma screens up and running. He gave me the thumbs up. So we were set there. My job was to go to the incident and assist the incident commander. We were never the incident commanders, but we would help the incident commander with everything they needed outside of their own job. So for this one, it's the fire chief. My job was to go to the fire chief and help him with things outside of the fire department.
So you're there to bring the full weight of the mayor's office and the emergency response resources that the city of New York has to bear for the benefit and the use of the first responders and the guy who's on scene leading the charge. And this had just become automatic for you. Your team fires up. You're, as you said, I think that narrative, by the way, was pretty common. I mean, we just had no idea what we were in for when this incident occurs, but you don't play it. You don't play it anyway. You just play it like an event and we've got to respond, and kind of your training takes over as to where you're going to go and what you're going to do.
Absolutely right. Uh, I went down to my car, which was parked in front. I had like undercover police car kind of thing. And I opened the trunk up, and I took off my tie and my dress shirt, and I put on the raid jacket that said mayor's office on the breast and big on the back, and my heavy leather boots and this stupid green helmet they made us wear to identify us. And we're trained as firefighters that you can before you go into a building that's in the middle of being destroyed, you want to look at three sides of the building to get a good size up in your head. So whether a building's on fire or collapsing or a plane hit it, you want to try and get an idea of what's happening to that building.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I was at the street level on VC Street, and in order to look around the other side of the North Tower, I had to go up a level to the plaza level. So I ran up an outdoor concrete staircase to get up to the plaza level. And that staircase later on becomes very famous because it becomes known as the survivor staircase. And it is the biggest artifact in the 9/11 museum today, because so many people, after I ran up, so many people ran down to get away from the towers, and they lived. So that staircase probably saved thousands of people's lives. But
Wow.
This is early on, and I went up and I went to the plaza level, and I went over where the plaza was in between the World Trade Center complex, and it was loaded with debris, parts of building, parts of plane that was on fire, and that dark black smoke. And if you remember in the videos, all the paper fluttering down from the offices up in the building. And that's what the scene looked like. And a little bit of Armageddon. And so I started to think to myself, this might be bigger than I thought. I'm at the bottom of the tower and I'm looking up 80 stories to try and see if I can get an idea of what's happening up there. And I'm underneath it, and it's just too high and too far away, and it's hard for me to get any good size up.
But you're getting a sense from the debris field and the amount of stuff that's coming down. I guess, for lack of a better term, you'll call them instincts, that your heart started to tell you, your mind started to tell you that, this is going to be a bigger issue.
Yeah, this is exactly right. I don't know how big, but it's going to be a bigger issue.
And so how does this progress? I mean, I think I share the feelings of everybody who are just captivated by the firsthand experience that I think, few of us ever have a peek into. I mean, the worst of this is about to come. And so you're just managing the situation, kind of blocking and tackling, going through your protocols of how to assemble a team and how to get everybody deployed and how to fight this incident.
Yeah, I mean, I have to get into the building. I have to get into the command post, and start dealing with all the different groups that are rushing to help. Right. So I went into the building. This is the North Tower. I went into the building, and I was still up one level. So I had to go down one level to the street level where the lobby was, where the fire command station was. And there was an escalator, and there were hundreds of civilians trying to get on that escalator to go down again, to go underground and get out. That's how they were being directed. So it was hundreds of office workers who were not doing what you thought they might be doing. They were not pushing and shoving and trampling each other out of the way. In fact, it was the opposite. For every person who was disabled, obese, injured, pregnant, there were 4 or 5 office workers, not cops or firemen, office workers who were helping that person. And in my head, I said, no matter what happens to us today, we're going to be okay, because that's the true human spirit. The true human spirit is good. When someone
Wow.
trips and falls in front of us, we reach down and help them up, right? That's what we do. We're good. There's a percentage that aren't good, but by far, the spirit, the human spirit is very good, and we help each other. And Charlie, that's what I'm witnessing right here in front of me now. You know, in getting on this escalator, they were helping each other out. You know,
Yeah, you saw the true, and I have to tell you, I mean, I'm as you speak, I think everybody will be imagining, what this environment must be like, and that is what rings in my head is just it feels like chaos, but for you to witness the true heart and soul and nature of humanity at work in crisis is just so refreshing and so hopeful for me to hear, even as this story darkens, that we're left with this glimmer, this, as you called it, this ray of light, that is the goodness of society.
it was beautiful.
Wow.
Patty Brown, Captain Patty Brown, who was a famous New York fireman who was murdered on September 11th, and one of my very best friends would say to that, it's kind of beautiful, and he would say it because that's what he thought, but he wasn't sure if you agreed with him, and it was kind of how he thought, but he wasn't sure if you agreed, and that's I can hear his voice in my head right now saying that was kind of beautiful, right? And yeah,
Yeah, that's so what a nice memory, because I don't know if you were listening, if you heard the language that Tim uses. It's when I met him, it was the first time I'd ever heard it. We've heard of those we lost, we've heard of those that were taken from us, but as a result of what occurred at the World Trade Center on that morning, Tim will tell you that what occurred to the men and women of New York City, the first responders, the civilians, the office workers, was that they were murdered. And I'd never heard, up until I met Tim Brown, that description. It cut to my very core to think of the context of what had happened that way. And I've never been the same since, to be honest with you, Tim. And I don't want to lose. I mean, I know the event, the murder has occurred now. I mean, we've already lost. We don't know how many are up there as of right now that can't get down. But you know, is that a description that you've always used, or as soon as you found out it was a terrorist attack, you turned from languaging that as a loss or a taking to the murder of your fellow men and women and residents in New York City? It's to me, it just strikes right at my core.
I would say that I reacquired that because in 2009 and 2010, when I was doing some activism in the media on behalf of the 9/11 families, people were trying to change the narrative of what happened that day and who did it. Uh, and they pushed me, and I'm the wrong guy to push with this stuff because
Yeah,
I'll
you
bite
are.
back.
Yeah, you are.
And and so I decided that I wanted to tell the whole truth, not part of the truth, the whole truth. And in the whole truth, I call it the heroes and the horrors of 9/11, right? But the whole truth is that 2,977 innocent human beings were murdered by radical Islamist terrorists, and that's the truth. And no one can ever dispute that. That is a fact. And my friends were murdered. Patty Brown, Terry Hatton, Ray Downey, Chris Blackwell. I can go on and on and on. My friends, and a lot of innocent humans who were those good humans, right? They're the people in those buildings, the people on those planes are the people who would have reached down at that escalator and helped someone up because they were good people. And they were murdered by evil Islamist terrorists, every one of them. And I'll take it even further, Charlie. I was just doing numbers this morning on how many people have died post 9/11 from 9/11 illness. And every one of those people who have died in the last 20 years from 9/11 illness were also murdered by Islamist terrorists. Their lives were cut short because of this terrorist attack. So that when you say that, that's the whole truth. You don't just cherry pick and say, oh, Terry and Chris and Patrick and Ray died, because that is not the whole truth.
Yeah, and it's not accurate. You know, you are like I said. I mean, I can't really emphasize how deeply that changed. And when I share this with people now today that haven't heard that narrative, and I mentioned, you know, how I learned that narrative, the whole truth, as you call it. You know, people pause, they stop for a second, and it really does bring to light what actually happened. And I just, you know, your heart, your courage, your vulnerability to carry that message and to carry the memory is just words. It's powerful. I don't even know. I can't even really do it justice, Tim. I mean, it's a it's a burden and a blessing, you know, that you have the courage to carry. And I think we're all so lucky, because we shouldn't forget and we can't forget, you know. And you, I know you've been, you know, you're also part of the task force, I think, that went down to Oklahoma as well. I mean, you have firsthand knowledge of what these events do to, you know, innocent people. And so it was the first time I'd heard you say it on the podcast. I knew we were going to get into it because it changed my life. And so as we go through this today, as you hear the rest of Tim's story, remember that narrative and the whole truth, because he tells it probably about as well as anybody I know. And so now this event, you know, people are rushing to the scene, I'm assuming, to try and save that first tower. You guys are assessing the damage that's up there, and then the day just becomes unraveled, right? We've got the second plane that hits, and then we've got, you know, the fire that's burning hot, and people trying to come down. Had you, and I can't imagine anybody was even thinking the extent of the catastrophe that was about to occur. Had the building collapsing, you know, really kind of hit you at all? Was that on your radar? Was that on people's radar screens, that we've got to get people out because this building could collapse, or just we've got to get them out because the damage of this fire could get worse?
So the leadership of the fire department, the most experienced chiefs,
Yep.
Including Chief Ray Downey, who was the chief of Special Operations Command and the father of the modern rescue company, and the father of the FEMA urban search and rescue program. So they got together and they actually talked about this right in the beginning, and they told they told the mayor that they can save everybody below the fire for sure. And that we couldn't get enough water up to put out that much fire at such a high place. So it would be very difficult to fight the fire and save people above the fire. But the fire would burn up and it would burn itself out, and the building would not collapse, because we've been through many of these fires in high-rise buildings, and we had never experienced a collapse of a high-rise building due to fire. However, there were differences here. The towers were actually designed with the thought or the notion that a plane back in the 70s, whatever the biggest plane was then, if that plane ran into the building, it was built to withstand that impact and that damage and fire. However, 30 whatever years later, the planes are much bigger, they're much more powerful, and they carry much more fuel.
Yeah, good point. The fuel capacity definitely had increased, and those guys had just taken off.
Right. And you know, this was all in their planning. They were not stupid people. Uh, and they did some pretty meticulous planning. And so I don't want to speak for them, but for us, we were of the belief that they would not collapse. Um,
and so we're fighting the event. We're getting people out. We're trying to save as many people below the fire. The second plane hits. I mean, and so you've got um, men and women of the New York Fire Department, the police department, first responders, just responding to save as many people as possible. And then, kind of walk us through those moments when things changed. The second plane hits, the fire's burning, and this collapse occurs. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like on that scene.
so I want to talk about a couple of the firefighters before we get
Please.
to South Tower. Um, I got down to the bottom of that escalator, and this is important because this is what the firefighters and police officers did that day. I got to the bottom of that escalator in the North Tower, and right in front of me was firefighter Chris Blackwell from Rescue 3 in the Bronx, where I used to work. And we were the Bronx guys, right?
Yeah.
We didn't follow the rules like the Manhattan guys did as much. Our gear was all burned up. Our helmets were burned up so much that they sat crooked on our head. Uh, we didn't really shave the way we were supposed to all the time. And we may have had a little bit of an attitude. And so that was Chris Blackwell, right? I got to the bottom of the escalator, and Chris is standing right there. And we come right like this, face to face. And Chris always had the unlit stub of a cigar in his mouth, unshaven, helmet's crooked. He's all his gear is burned up.
I see him. I love that.
Yeah. And we always greeted each other. Okay, Chris was also on his time off from being a hero New York fireman. He was a paramedic in Connecticut. So all he did with his life was save people's lives. And he was so good that if we ever got a patient, a victim of a fire or a building collapse or a car crash, especially a child, we would always look for Chris to put that patient in Chris's hands, because we knew in his hands they had the best shot at life. And he was that respected in the special operations community of the New York Fire Department. Everybody knew how special this guy was. And so I come down to the bottom of the escalator. We come face to face. We always greeted each other the same way. He always had the unlit stub of a cigar hanging out of the corner of his mouth to complete the caricature of him. And we came right face to face, and he would do the same thing. He would reach up like this with his hand, take the cigar out of his mouth. We both leaned in, kissed on the lips, and we both went to attention again. He put it back at attention. And we would do that no matter how snotty or smudged or whatever our faces were. It didn't matter. And we did it because we loved each other as brothers, but it was more than that. We had been through so much in our career together that this man was like my blood brother. And we also did it because it freaked all the firemen out, and we thought it was pretty funny. So
well, you can hear the fiber of the relationship in the way you describe, and so much about really this episode is about really not just your own overcome story, but to remember, so much about that day and the people and the personalities that were there and that aren't here now, and the role they played in your lives and so many others. And I just, I kind of felt the fibers of that relationship as you were describing, kind of this, not just touching kind of greeting, but also the funny part of it to give your guys a rib. I mean, that's just who you guys are. And I love what I love a lot about you, first of all, but what I really love about you is how careful you are in every conversation I've ever had with you to bring up the memory of the specific men and women that aren't in your life anymore, and what they meant to you and what they meant to each other. And so, yeah, man, just take this where take this where you're going to take it, because that's exceptional.
Thank you. So we did that greeting, and then Chris said to me, "Timmy, this is really bad." And for us to say that to each other is significant. I said, "I know, Chris, be careful. I love you." And he said, "I love you." And Chris turned around and he went in the stairwell and he went up. After he said to me, Timmy, this is really bad. He still did it, Charlie. He still turned around. He still went in that stairwell and he still went up, knowing that there was a very good chance he was not coming back. He
Yeah,
still did it.
yeah, the world, the universe is lost a good one, I guess, is lost a great one, for lack of any other way to describe it, because the nature of that human character of him and so many others, that in the face of knowing that, and I just thank you for bringing that to the forefront, which is, I know this is going to be bad, but brother, I'm on my way to do what I do.
Yeah.
Ah,
We took an oath, right? Firefighters, police officers, military, intelligence. We take an oath that we are committing our lives to serve and protect those who are in our community, but many of whom we don't know,
right.
right? And in our first day, we take the oath and we swear, right? It's just a matter of if you will be called one day to fulfill that oath. But we've already made that commitment, we've already sworn our commitment to that oath. And on this day, September 11th, 2001, 700 first responders fulfilled their oath,
Ah,
right?
yeah, they did.
So Chris turns and goes into the stairway. My best friend Terry Hatton calls my name. I go over to Terry and he wraps his arms around me, the Captain of Rescue One, and he squeezes me to his chest and he kisses me on the cheek. And in my ear, he says, I love you, brother. I may never see you again. And I blew him off because we had been through so many things together before, and we had always come out. We had cheated death so many times before together, and we always came out.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing, because I think that is, with that kind of experience, you use the term blow them off. I mean, it's kind of disregarded. You fought a lot of fires, you've been in a lot of tragedy, and you guys have walked out and survived. And so, yeah, this seems bad, but you don't expect it to turn from bad to worse, and you sure don't expect that those words are actually going to be fulfilled. I'm sure that's a really difficult thing. And we'll talk about all of the things that you've had to draw on to overcome the loss of so many close friends, men and women, to get where you are today. But yeah, I mean, I get that. It's like, we've said that a few times and we're still here. So this is no different, bro. I mean, go up and do your thing, and I'll see you for a cup of coffee, and we'll rinse off, when this thing's over. I mean, that's kind of what I hear your thinking is.
Yeah, that's right. But it wasn't his thinking.
Yeah.
He knew it. He said those words to me. And after he said those words to me, Charlie, he turned around and he took his men and he went in the stairwell and they went up. And the reason I wanted to point out those two specific cases is because that's what the firefighters of the FDNY, the police officers of the Port Authority Police, the police officers of the New York City Police Department, that's what they all did. They knew it. And they still went in and went up those stairwells to help people they didn't know, to fulfill their oath that is God-given.
Yeah, it's uncommon valor. It's not something that the typical man or woman, in this world, has to commit to and has to do. It's an incredibly unique position that you assume, and a really important oath that you take, and to see it fulfilled in such a meaningful way it's so powerful.
343 New York City firefighters were murdered by radical Islamist terrorists on 9/11 Our previous largest loss of life in the New York City Fire Department was 12, which was devastating. Now it's just think about that number, 343.
I can't. I mean, it's just it's overwhelming. To be
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, I'm honored to be sitting in front of somebody who has witnessed this and can bring the depth and weight of what actually occurred and really boil it down to reality for us. I mean, it's overwhelming. That number's overwhelming, to be honest with you.
37 Port Authority police officers and 23 NYPD police officers who all did the same that the firemen did. They went up, they fulfilled their oath. Out of the 23 NYPD heroes, 14 of them were from their elite emergency service unit, some of the best cops in the world, the most highest trained cops in the world. Out of the 37 Port Authority police officers, the Port Authority police is a small job. They have just responsibility for the World Trade Center and some of the other transportation infrastructure in New York City. So percentage-wise, their job lost more than the fire department did. So they took a huge hit in the Port Authority Police Department. Also, the largest loss of life of law enforcement in American history in one incident. And we don't talk about them enough. They did the same thing the fire and the NYPD guys did. They ran toward it. They went up in the towers. They were rescuing and helping people as much as the other cops and the firemen were. Out of the 343 New York City firefighters, 100 of them were from our Special Operations Command, which was only 300 big. So we lost 1/3 of our Special Operations Command on September 11th, including our chief, Ray Downey, who was also a legend himself. When I'm running up the West Side Highway after the South Tower collapses, off to my left, I see Chief Downey and First Assistant Commissioner Bill Feehan, both my very good friends, and they both wave to me and yell, "Timmy, be careful." And they would be dead within about 10 minutes of telling me.
You couldn't have imagined that collapse. I mean, I can't even fathom what the sound and the feeling of that catastrophe and that really catastrophic kind of consequence as a result of what had occurred. And really, I think I just remember hearing it, seeing it, hearing the people that were reporting about it announce that literally the World Trade Center tower had collapsed and what that meant. And, because, that was really kind of uncovering what was going to be a huge loss.
Yeah. I don't know. We have to remember the whole story. We have to remember who did it. We have to remember why they did it. We have to ensure that that this never happens on American soil again, that we never allow a group like Al-Qaeda to develop plans to attack us on our soil. And we have to always remember the families. And, the current thing is all the people who are dying from 9/11 illness, right? We'll add probably another couple hundred names to a wall in Long Island, which is the responders who died from 9/11 illness, including Patty Brown's brother, Michael, who came to New York from Las Vegas to dig through the rubble for his brother. And Michael died in October from 9/11 illness. So I'll be out in Long Island to kind of unveil his name on the wall. And next week I'll be going to, try and protect my own health. I'll be getting invasively taken care of, should I say. And we had a little scare a few weeks ago with my PSA count was up, and we had a little scare that I might have prostate cancer, but it came back okay. And so I'm doing everything I can possibly do to keep myself alive, which means I keep my voice alive, which means I can talk about the truth of September 11th, the whole truth of September 11th. We're going to be getting through this 20th anniversary. I have over 75 rooms reserved for friends and family and people from the military, people from the intelligence community, all people who have had a hand in serving justice for us, for the families, for the firefighters and police officers, taking the fight to the enemy, finding those responsible, and ensuring that a group like Al-Qaeda does not develop again with the intentions of attacking Americans.
So it's so powerful that the amount that you do and the amount of emotional energy that you expend in support of that cause, because you talked about two things we'll touch on, because both of them very important actually. So the first is when we talk about these numbers and we cast this net, the amount of families, sons that lost fathers and mothers, daughters that lost fathers and mothers, spouses that lost loved ones, mother and fathers that lost children. I mean, you take the grief net, and it is far and it is wide, and many people that had never experienced much in the way of loss experienced great loss. I mean, companies wiped out, family members taken away or murdered, as I will say now. And you've yourself had to spend a lot of time picking up those pieces. So first of all, we do need to remember all those families, all those children, husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, grandfathers, partners, of all shapes and sizes, that in all walks of life that suffered incredible loss. And you've had to be on the front lines of attending countless funerals and all of the things that you've done to stand with them and for them, as you continue. And that's gotta take a toll on you.
Yeah, it certainly takes a toll on me. I went to therapy early on, and it took me about 10 therapists till I found one that I felt was going to be helpful. And she taught me about compartmentalization, which I didn't know back then. But, in my grief, I mean, we were doing 20 funerals a day. In the not just the grief of going to a funeral, but the guilt of not being able to make 15 of the 20 funerals that day of your friends. But she taught me compartmentalization and how I would allow myself, and I did this, I would allow myself to grieve for a certain block of time every day. And then I would get a stiff upper lip. I'd stand up and I would try to have a productive day in other ways. I used to fly, I started working for the feds in 2002, so I was flying back and forth to DC, and whenever I would get on the plane, I would put the window shade down and I would lean my head against the window shade and put on the noise canceling headphones, and I would put on Andrea Bocelli's voice, and I would cry for an hour where nobody could see me. My head was buried, and I would just cry for the loss of my friends. But when those wheels hit the ground, I took Bocelli off, I wiped my face off, and I raised the shade up, and I went to work. And that simple thing of notion of compartmentalization uh, helped me tremendously. So I highly recommend therapy, but you have to be with a therapist that you're comfortable with, which is the harder part of it, I think. Um, and again, I'll take it back to where we started out with the conversation: mission and purpose in your life, and whatever that means. And if you can't find it, go start helping people who are less fortunate than you. Go join your volunteer firehouse, become an EMT or paramedic, or become a paid firefighter, or do things in your life that matter. Go to the soup kitchen and help out, and it will start bringing back your purpose and mission, and it will begin to light a fire under you again. I know so many of our hero military who got blown up over and over in the global war on terror, and then when they came back, they committed suicide because they could not find their purpose and mission back here in America, and they lost their unit and their structure. So for all those who are military out there, get involved with your local fire department, whatever that means, and help them and let them help you. It's a similar brotherhood to being in the military, sisterhood to being in the military. I think that's really important. And then for me, Charlie, me personally, my family was worried about me and suicide back in 2001 and 2002. I never had that in me, and I will never have that in me to ever do something like that. But I cannot talk about that without talking about my faith in God, and that God obviously did not want to take me in 2001. He didn't want to bring me home. He wanted me to stay here. Why? To have this voice for my friends, to speak of them, of their heroism, to take care of their families, to be an example for their children who lost their father. Even 20 years later, this year, a couple of I call them 9/11 kids, even though they're in their 20s.
Yeah, right.
They gave me the nickname the Shepherd, and in their groups, they know if they have a problem or if they have a question. They say to the other kids, this and that, and the other kids say, call the Shepherd, and they call me. And
what a purpose. I mean, those kids are very lucky to have you. And when we talk about overcoming, and the things that we've done, and thank you for, because so many people do suffer in silence, and overcoming, a national tragedy, to being on the front line of that, to overcoming the loss of so many brothers and sisters and friends, to being on the front line of surviving that, and then finding your purpose. And I think you described a couple of things. One is feeling your feelings, that feeling those feelings and knowing the sadness and not trying to stuff that down or numb it out or cover it up, or to put on that song and to have those tears come dripping down the side of your face, and mourn that loss, and then take the next right healthy action for your life. So when those wheels touch down, it's I've got a purpose, and I've got to show up for whoever I've got to show up for. And so we can do, my friend George Mumford, who's a performance expert, he's worked with some of the top athletes like Jordan and Bryant, Kobe Bryant. He always says, can we get to that place where we can hold the hope and the hurt in our lives, and know that we can have both, and be okay. And thank you for sharing both of those. And I wanted to ask you one last thing about your own recovery, of overcoming all of this tragedy, and using the purpose and passion you have to fuel that. How important has connection and community been to you? I mean, they say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I know you've been a bit of glue or a shepherd, so to speak. And I know people that are trapped with emotions, they're trapped with adversity in their lives. We have this need to be connected, but this feeling of wanting to be alone. And how important was connection and community in your own personal recovery and having to overcome this stuff, staying connected?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. Community connection. And it was hard for me because my community was taken from me on September 11th.
Right.
All my
Right.
male friends were murdered, you know. I mean, that's who I hung out with all the time. I didn't have very much outside of the fire department guys in New York here. And um, in 2004, I retired in 2004. So in those years, 2004, 2005, I would say were my worst time, my lowest time, my darkest time, my time of being lost. And I was in New York and I didn't have any guy friends. And I thought what I needed was to find good quality men like I lost. And in order to replace them, I need to find other good quality men. And that's not an easy thing to do when you're getting, a little bit older, right?
Right. Yeah. We don't have the ball games and coaching the
Yeah.
kids and, kind of all of the thing, going to the cool school functions. As we get older, there's not as many places. It really struck a chord because you lost a community.
Yeah. And I was searching for that, and I was open to it and I was trying, but it was going nowhere. And I was going to a little Italian restaurant near my apartment here in Midtown, and the food was excellent. The two brothers from Italy, really nice guys. They became my friends. But I would go there and sit at the bar, and there was this very cute girl, Deborah, behind the bar, and she was always like bouncing around behind the bar, always happy, always a smile on her face, and it just filled my heart to go just be near her, to be around her. And one time she said to me, "What are you doing when I get off?" And I was like, "Whatever you're doing, Deb."
Well answered. Great answer.
She's very cute. And she said, "Wait for me. I got to do some things. Wait for me. I'm going to take you somewhere." So we got off. She took me out. We went down the block a little bit, and she takes me to an apartment building. And it's a walk up. We go up to the 5th floor, and she knocks on the door. And this guy opens the door. Deborah's skin was a little bit olive, dark, curly brown hair. And the dude that answered the door was like white Irish guy. And he has a baby in his arm. And he get big smile on his face and he says, "Come on in." And he's like, "Sit on the couch next to me, sit on the couch." So I sat down next to him. This apartment is like a tiny 1-bedroom. And so the music is on. And the next thing I know, Matt's wife, Lorana, puts a cold beer in my hand and one in Matt's hand. And he's bouncing Liam, the baby, on his knee. And then another knock on the door and 2 more girls come in. And then another knock on the door and 2 more girls come in. And now there are these 8 gorgeous women in front of us. And they keep turning the music up and they all start dancing. And Matt says to me, "Not bad, huh, for a Friday night?" And I was like, "Holy cow, what is going on here?" And in the end, I tell this story. These women, these 8 women, become my friends, and they're Brazilian women. So they all have these huge hearts and this brightness about them. They took me under their wing, Charlie, and they loved me and gave me a smile. And they took me to Brazil twice, to where they grew up. So my point is with this, it brought me out of my doldrums. It brought me out of my dark place. It brought me to a place where I looked forward to tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing friends again. I always thought it was supposed to be, I was going to replace my guys with other quality men. And God has a sense of humor
He sure
sometimes.
does. He
Yeah.
sure
And
does.
he's like, no, 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 you're going to meet these 8 beautiful Brazilian women who are going to give you more love than you've had since you were a child with your mom. And they did. And then to bring the story all the way around, when you brought up Jay Redmond before, Navy SEAL, you know, it took me a decade to meet someone of Jay's quality, who was like Terry Hatton or Chris Blackwell or Patty Brown or Ray Downey or Bill Feehan, a man of that quality. So it does. These things don't happen on our timeline, and it's hard to hold on and be patient. But you know what? I did meet Jay Redmond, and Jay Redmond has become one of my very best friends. And he is every bit a quality man as my friends who were murdered on September 11th. So you can find it again. It just takes time. You just have to figure out how to get from A to B and hold on. And I am living a whole new life of laughter and love and light again. And I am so happy that I never chose a different way out of it.
Well, you've served the world. You've served the memory of your fallen brothers and sisters and their families, and the patience that it takes. That if you just stay in the game, that is the whole idea behind resilience and surviving and being, is just to stay in the game. It's a cliche, I know, but we do just live a day at a time, and we can make the most of it or make the worst of it. It depends on the choices that we make, and what you've chosen to do has been so selfless. And before we wrap up, I just like, how can people support you? How can our community, you know, aid in the things that you're doing? What are the causes that you continue to fight for and be a voice of? And how can people connect with you and provide, some continued support for you?
So my by far favorite charity, and I have a few, but um, the mission that the Tunnel to Towers Foundation has taken on is very near to my heart. T2T.org. It's this officially the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Uh, Stephen Siller was a firefighter murdered on September 11th, and his siblings uh, started this foundation initially to pay off his 5 children's more college education, but they very quickly raised that money, and so they decided to start building smart homes for catastrophically injured military. So they've been doing that now for at least 15 years, but they have a list of 1,000 still who need homes. They also now pay off the mortgages of fire and police line of duty deaths. They pay off the mortgage if their family has a child under 16 years old. And the reason for that is so that that child is not forced out of their home just because the breadwinner was killed in the line of duty serving um, America. So they'll go in very quickly and pay off the mortgage of that family. I'm very involved in that work. Um, Currently, Frank Siller, the chairman and CEO of the foundation and 9/11 family member, is walking from the Pentagon to Shanksville to the World Trade Center.
Wow,
He is
amazing. Yeah, the
68 years old. He had a heart attack last year, and he's coming back strong. And he's walking in memory of his little brother, but also for all the first responders who have died, who were murdered on 9/11, who have passed away from 9/11 illness since, and who in our military, our heroes in the military, who have given their actual limbs. Uh, in just seeking justice for us and for America. A book that goes along with that was written by Doc Mike Brown, Patty Brown's brother, called What Brothers Do. What Brothers Do
that.
by Michael Everett Brown is a very well-written story of our time after 9/11 and what we went through. Very sadly, Michael passed away in October from 9/11 illness, from breathing the dust, searching for his brother in the rubble. But before Michael died, he asked me to lead the charge with his book and to ensure that people don't forget about his brother, about himself, and about what we went through. And all proceeds from the sale of What Brothers Do goes to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. It's an excellent book. It's an excellent read. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on the Tunnel to Towers website. So that's what I would love to do the rest of my life, Charlie, is to work with Tunnel to Towers and take care of our American heroes who protect us, who serve us, who keep us safe, so that every cop, every fireman, and military member in America knows that we've got their back if they make the ultimate sacrifice. And there is nothing we can do that says never forget better than that.
Well, I love it. And we'll please throw your support behind these incredible causes. I mean, because those shoulders that you see on Tim Brown are wide and strong, but they carry a lot of weight. You're out there really using your voice and your presence to help so many people and share and carry their memory. Being in your presence for just a few days changed me forever. Your power of courage and vulnerability and what all the things that you've overcome is such a lesson to so many of us. Because as you said, I mean, you do have a choice. You can crawl in a hole, you can make unhealthy choices, and you can miss out on the gifts of life and the gifts of giving, and your purpose and your passion are so big now. Tim, I know it's been an exhausting day this time of year for you. I just have such respect and really just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your time to come on Overcome Out Loud, share your story, and to be the friend that you are to so many, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie. God bless you, Charlie. God bless all your listeners, and thanks for listening. And never forget the stories, the heroes, the horrors, and the whole truth about 9/11.